You usually expect when a guy comes back from the injured list, especially in some cases with a concussion, for it to be kind of a slow return to the lineup, right? It takes him a little bit to get going. Well, not the case for Jorge Mateo. Activated by the Orioles Tuesday, homers in his first at-bat back, and leads the Orioles to a shutout win over the Atlanta Braves. And I'll recap it all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Orioles fans, today is Wednesday, June 12th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 4-0 victory over the Braves on Tuesday night in Game 1 of a 3-game set. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know, including a great return from Jorge Mateo, a great return to the lineup for Austin Hayes, and Albert Suarez just continuing to do his thing out there. And then for the rest of the pod, we will break down the set of roster moves that the Orioles made before Tuesday's game. With Jorge Mateo reinstated, they made the move we all kind of expected, with Connor Norby going down to AAA, about what his future is with the Orioles. And then the other move they made, the unexpected one, a very unfortunate top reliever is heading to the injured list with some concerns about this injury. We'll break it all down coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by eBay Motors. From brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. So we start today's episode with another Orioles victory, their 5th in a row, as the final score from Oriole Park at Camden Yards on Tuesday night is the O's 4 and the Atlanta Braves nothing in Game 1 of a 3-game set, as the Orioles return back home after mopping the Rays over the weekend and after playing 4 straight series against the AL East. Well, they come home against the NL East and they continue their winning ways. The O's, with the victory in this one, get to 44-22 on the season. Through 66 games, they have won 2/3 of baseball games. They're on pace right now for 108 wins, and they are just playing some fantastic baseball at the moment. However, as I record, the Yankees lead the Royals 7-0 in the 6th inning, so it looks like the Yankees are going to get another win and stay 2.5 games ahead of the Orioles. But I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the O's win over Atlanta on Tuesday night. The first thing you need to know is Jorge Mateo returned off the injured list and into the lineup with an absolute bang on Tuesday night. Before the game, Orioles activating Mateo off the 7-day concussion IL after you have that super weird moment where Cedric Mullins accidentally hits him in the back of the head with his bat. Mateo has to go on the IL last Monday, and he basically, missed a little over a week, returns to the lineup at a perfect time because the Orioles were facing a left-handed starter in Max Fried of the Braves, and Mateo's been fantastic against lefties this year. So a great time to get him in there. He comes up for his first at-bat back. Orioles have first and second, nobody out in a 0-0 game in the bottom of the second. He gets a hanging curveball, the signature pitch, at least the curveball itself, not a hanging curveball, from Max Fried, and Mateo demolishes it. A 3-run shot into the Oriole bullpen. It was almost caught by CNL Perez, tried to use his hat, but the ball bounced out. But either way, 101 off the bat, 402 feet for Mateo. He did not waste any time. This dude, it doesn't matter that he misses time with a concussion, is just continuing to mash left-handers and proving his worth on this Orioles team. Now, the second thing you need to know from the O's win on Tuesday is that Austin Hayes also returned to the lineup and also really provided the rest of the offensive spark for the Orioles. Now, Hayes did come in as a pinch hitter Saturday in Tampa Bay, but actually had not started since the finale last Thursday in Toronto. Did not start any of the 4 games against the Rays, and a lot of that was because he was hurting a little bit. Took a 97-mile-per-hour fastball off the ribs when he was hit by a pitch last week against Toronto. Then apparently his back started tightening up a little bit while he was missing time. Just wasn't feeling right. But luckily, his body got right in time to, again, a good spot for the righty Hayes, who's been hitting lefties well, to get him in there against the left-hander. and he came through. A 3-for-4 night for Austin Hayes, picking up his first 3-hit game of the season and his first 3-hit performance since he went 4-for-4 against the Angels in Anaheim back on September 6th of 2023. He ripped a single in the second up the middle right before Mateo's 3-run homer. That was 107 off the bat. Then he had a softer hit single in the 4th inning before demolishing a big-time RBI single in the 6th that extended the Oriole lead to 4-0. That one he hit 110 miles per hour off the bat. Couldn't complete the 4-for-4, had one more at-bat, but was retired, but still a great night for Hayes to get his first 3-hit game. Hayes is now 9-for-19 at the plate in June. And since he returned from the IL from that calf injury in mid-May, he certainly still has not been an everyday player since he returned. You know, he's gotten some bumps and bruises, and just with the way other guys are playing, with the way Hayes was struggling, he hasn't re-earned an everyday role. But Austin Hayes is now hitting .347 since returning off the injured list with that calf injury. He has gotten his swing back. He has gotten his mojo back. He's looking much more like the first half all-star Austin Hayes from 2023, and that is a great sign for the Orioles offense. Third thing you need to know from the O's win Tuesday over Atlanta is that the Orioles did it all without Gunnar Henderson. For the first time this season, Gunnar getting his first full day off of 2024, not in the Orioles lineup, as Brandon Hyde mentioned after Monday's win in Tampa, despite the fact that Gunnar had a big day and had the leadoff homer, that Gunnar was just really tired. And after he said that, you could tell, okay, Hyde is going to get him a day off. And it was the perfect time. Now, Gunnar Henderson, after struggling against lefties his first 2 years in the bigs, has actually been really, really good against left-handed pitching this year. But if you're going to get him a day off, you'd rather him sit against the left-hander. And it was one of the best left-handers in baseball in Max Fried on the mound for Atlanta. So a perfect time to give him the night off. It worked out well, right? Because Jorge Mateo was coming back. He was going to play against a lefty either way, so you can easily slot him into shortstop defensively, where he plays a great shortstop, just as does Gunnar Henderson. And you combine those two things, it was the perfect storm. You know, the Orioles had 4 runs on 6 hits without Gunnar in the lineup. It wasn't his stellar day at the plate as a team. It was, you know, a lot more about the pitching as well to shut out the Braves, but they did enough, and you always love to get your stars, hey, a full day off if you can, just to reset things if they are feeling tired. Jordan Westburg did hit leadoff again in Gunnar's spot, did go 0-for-4 with a couple of strikeouts, also made another error. Not a banner day for Westburg for the Orioles, but either way, without Gunnar, they can still beat one of the best teams in baseball. That's how good these guys are playing. Fourth thing you need to know from the O's series opening win on Tuesday is that Albert Suarez got the start and just kind of did his thing again for the Orioles. You can kind of pencil him in at this point for 5 solid innings, and these were 5 strong innings from Albert Suarez. Actually, 5 1/3 scoreless for Suarez on Tuesday night. 4 hits, 4 strikeouts, and 3 walks on 97 pitches. Braves had 5 hard hit balls against him, and he has lowered his ERA to 1.61. That combines both his time as a starter and a reliever this year for the Orioles. In either role, he's just been great. And what he's basically, 5 long innings, you know, we're going to have to use a little more bullpen than usually would when Suarez starts, but he's giving you a chance to win every single time he pitches, even if he isn't pitching super deep into the games. It's been a while since he pitched into the 6th. That was nice. He got a fly out to start the 6th. Then he gave up back-to-back singles. His pitch count was at 97. Hyde was trying to stretch him through 6, just didn't work out. They took him out of the game, but he was still good. Now, the one issue was his fastball is kind of his calling card, right? He's up to 95, 96. He really had very little command of that 4-seam fastball on Tuesday, and I just a 36% in-zone rate from the 4-seamer. It was still his number one pitch. 44 of his 97 pitches were 4-seam fastballs, and the velocity was where it normally is, but he had to rely on his other stuff for more called strikes and also for more swings and misses. And I thought the cutter and the changeup really combined to look good. 29 cutters and 20 changeups. That's more than you usually see Suarez throw, but he got some good swings and misses on the cutter and on the changeup. Those were his 2 strikeout pitches. He even threw the changeup to both righties and lefties. You generally more see him use it against just left-handers, but I really like that. Like, Suarez had the confidence in both of those off-speed deliveries when he didn't have his best fastball, and that still allowed him to get through a lineup, which, although they're struggling and they're without Acuna, this is still a very dangerous Braves lineup, and he just kind of rolled through them through 5 1/3. He will maybe lose his rotation spot whenever Dean Kramer comes back in a couple of weeks. We will see, but he's certainly doing enough to keep it if the Orioles do want to go that way. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles 4-0 win over the Braves on Tuesday night to open up this 3-game set in Baltimore is that the Oriole bullpen just continued to be incredible. Brandon Hyde going to Jacob Webb out of the pen to kind of begin his look into the bullpen. It was with the Orioles leading 3-0, 1 out, runners on first and second in the top of the 6th inning, and Jacob Webb just continues to have a fantastic season for the Orioles. Got 4 key outs in this game, including coming in and striking out Adam Duvall, getting Jared Kelenic to fly out to get out of that jam in the 6th. He comes back out in the 7th now with a 4-0 lead, gets a fly out of Murphy, a strikeout of Arcia. Then he walks Michael Harris, and then unfortunately Jordan Westberg makes kind of another untimely error that makes this inning end. But Yanier Cano came in, struck out Austin Riley, got the Orioles out of another jam. And after they got a 0 from Cionel Perez in the 8th and a 0 from Dylan Tate in the 9th, it was a great day. I mean, Jacob Webb had like all the stuff working. He was getting whiffs on the 4-seamer, the changeup, the sweeper. It all looked good. Tate was averaging 94 and was up to 96 miles an hour with his sinker in the 9th inning. That was really awesome to see. This Oriole bullpen between Webb, Cano, Perez, and Tate combined for 3 2/3 scoreless innings, 1 hit, 5 strikeouts, and 2 walks on Tuesday night. And I know the Orioles bullpen has been a topic of discussion, and I know it just got worse with the injury that we learned about on Tuesday. But this Oriole bullpen lately has been absolute nails since May 29th. This is including Tuesday. So the last 13 games the Orioles have played. And remember, in that stretch, there's only been 1 off day. And that includes 11 consecutive games in that stretch with no off days. The Orioles bullpen in the last 13 games has a 0.44 ERA. Let me say that again, 0.44 ERA. In those 13 games, the bullpen has covered 40 2/3 innings, allowing just 2 earned runs on 27 hits with 42 strikeouts and 12 walks, just obliterating opposing hitters. They have been locked down pretty much every time they've been out there. A special run for this bullpen. You know they're going to go get reinforcements, but right now this group really putting things together. That is the best bullpen ERA of any team in that stretch of the last 13 games in baseball, and they helped the Orioles secure their 6th shutout win of the season with a 4-0 victory over Atlanta. But the Orioles bullpen did take a hit on Tuesday. One of the biggest reasons why it was so awesome to see the pen go 3 2/3 scoreless, continue this great streak, is that they lost a guy who you could argue has been the Orioles' best reliever in 2024 and was easily a top 3 reliever for the Orioles last season as well. That is Danny Coulombe, who was placed on the injured list on Tuesday. So coming up next, we'll talk about what the injury is, what the severity could be, and how much the O's would miss Coulombe if he does have to spend some extended time on the injured list. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Here at Locked On Orioles, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's in the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. And you know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garner your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. See the link in this episode description below. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by PrizePicks. And to me, PrizePicks is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on anywhere from 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. You just log on to the PrizePicks app, and you see all the baseball games for that upcoming night. And you might see something like Adley Rutschman, more or less 1.5 hits. Well, the way Rutschman's swinging it, I will take the more on that one. And if you get it right, well, you're on your way to winning some money as well. You can win 100 times your money with baseball-only lineups at PrizePicks with any of the picks they've got on the app. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's at PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So the Orioles pitching was superb on Tuesday night. Albert Suarez and then 4 relievers as they shut out the Braves to take game 1 of this series. And it was huge. The Oriole bullpen did what they did because that bullpen got some bad news before the start of Tuesday's game. That is that left-handed reliever Danny Coulombe was placed on the 15-day injured list with elbow inflammation. And anytime you see a pitcher go on the IL with anything elbow-related, you start to worry. Now, the Orioles have had kind of a mixed bag with their injury luck this year. Of course, they knew they weren't having Felix Bautista. He got Tommy John last year. John Means comes back, then has to get a second Tommy John. Tyler Wells, he was elbow inflammation for a while. He got Tommy John. But then on the flip side, you had Grayson Rodriguez, pretty quick IL stint. Dean Kramer seems like he's at the end of a pretty quick IL stint. And even Kyle Bradish, who had a partial tear in his UCL, did the rest of the PRP injections, and he is back and pitching like, again, one of the best starters in the American League. So I know it feels like a lot of injuries. It's kind of been a mixed bag. I am really hoping the Danny Coulombe injury here ends up on the good side. Now, all we heard from manager Brandon Hyde before the game Tuesday when he talked to the media is he basically said, Coulombe's going to get some more testing done, and we will hope for the best. Now, it's not the greatest thing you want to hear, but we will wait and see until he gets some more tests. Apparently, Coulombe was throwing on Monday and felt a little sore. They kind of shut him down and decided, let's put you on the IL and find out what is going on here. Now, for me, and again, not a doctor, just have watched a lot of baseball and seen a lot of pitchers get injured. As soon as I see anything elbow or forearm, I get very, very worried about a long-term injury. And Danny Coulombe, although he is a reliever, would be a pivotal blow to this Orioles bullpen. I mean, already without Felix Bautista, we know that Craig Kimbrell can be shaky at times. We know, despite the incredible stretch they've been on, it's not the best bullpen in baseball. With Coulombe, without Coulombe, the Orioles will need to upgrade this bullpen at the trade deadline. But if they don't have Danny Coulombe, even if it's not a season-long injury, but it's some sort of extended absence, they're going to need to upgrade sooner rather than later because Coulombe has been fantastic once again this year. A 2.42 ERA in 26 innings. He has allowed just 13 hits this year, 28 strikeouts to only 3 walks and 3 home runs this season. That's right, 3 walks in 26 innings. He's just been incredible. He has not yet allowed an inherited runner to score all season. An inherited runner is when a reliever comes in the middle of an inning with runners already on base. He hasn't let any of those guys score. That is the calling card of an elite reliever. And that's what Coulombe has been. I mean, he's better against lefties, but he's getting lefties and righties out, which is what he did last year. This stuff is fantastic. That sweeper's amazing. When he throws in those fastballs to trick guys at 91, they look silly. It looks like he's throwing 99. And this kind of hurts me as well because if you had me name one pitcher, not just starting pitcher or relief pitcher, one pitcher on the Orioles that I like to watch the most, it is Danny Coulombe. And I am very upset that even he'll be out for these 15 days. Now, the hope is all the testing goes well. Maybe it's just a little swelling. They let it go down. Maybe it takes a little more than 2 weeks, but he's back at some point in July helping out the Orioles bullpen. Of course, the worst case scenario is this is more of a serious injury. He needs elbow surgery. He needs Tommy John, and he's done until, the end part of 2025. Could be somewhere in the middle. Could be the extremes. We just don't know yet. But I tend to get very worried when I see anything with the elbow. Now, whether it's 15 days, whether it's 15 months for the Orioles without Danny Coulombe, they're going to need to, one, make some upgrades at the trade deadline, but that's a little bit further down the road. Now, maybe if this is a serious injury, this speeds it up a little bit in terms of when they make trades. But for the here and now, there's going to need to be guys who step up. And certainly Webb and Perez and Tate certainly stepped up to complete the shutout on Tuesday night. But we'll definitely see Jacob Webb in some more high leverage spots. And we're going to see Dylan Tate and CNL Perez in more high leverage spots too. Those are going to be the 3 guys that would really need to step up in Coulombe's absence. You'll need Perez to be really your best high leverage lefty. And then Keegan Aiken will have to kind of bump back up into a bigger lefty spot. And then just in terms of key spots in the 7th or 8th, Webb and Tate are going to get more of those outings without Danny Coulombe. I mean, he is just such an important part, an underrated and important part of this Orioles bullpen. This is going to be a huge loss, even if it is just for, 2 or 3 weeks before he comes back. Now, to replace him on the roster for now, the Orioles did recall the right-hander Bryan Baker. Now, Baker didn't get into the game on Tuesday, but this will be Baker's first stint with the Orioles in 2024. Now, if you're newer to the team, not super familiar with Bryan Baker, Orioles brought him over on waivers back in 2021 in the offseason, and he made the Orioles opening day bullpen in 2022 and was really, really good. Through 70 innings in that 2022 season, had a 3.49 ERA, good strikeout rate, okay walk rate, flashed some really good stuff, and was kind of the Orioles' 7th or 8th inning guy for most of that season and was fairly impressive for the O's. He returned to the bullpen in 2023 and was not nearly as good. Now, his ERA at 3.60 was fairly similar, but he only threw 45 innings last year. The strikeout stuff was the same, but the walks went way up. He went to a 13% walk rate last year. His command really struggled, and he got sent down to AAA late in the season. Now, Baker kind of rebounded in Norfolk, was pitching really well, and the Orioles actually decided to add him to the playoff roster as basically the final reliever to put on the postseason roster. And Hyde said, look, we didn't have a lot of other great options, and Baker was pitching really well in AAA. Turned out to be the wrong move. He gave up some runs in the postseason as well. And all that kind of sputtered into, he was still in the 40-man roster. He still had options. He was in spring training with the Orioles. But I think most people thought, unless there are multiple injuries, Bryan Baker just doesn't have a spot in this opening day bullpen. And that's what happened. He was sent to AAA to begin the season, and it was a nightmare early on in AAA. At one point in May, Bryan Baker's ERA was pushing 10 in AAA Norfolk. It was not looking good. His overall stats in AAA this year, 22 innings, a 6.55 ERA, 19 hits, 30 strikeouts to 13 walks, and 4 home runs allowed. But it has been much, much better as of late. Baker, 5 straight scoreless appearances before getting called up. That is good stuff. In those 5 appearances, only 2 hits allowed over 5 innings, no runs, 6 Ks, and only 1 walk in his last 5 innings is something you really, really like to see. In terms of the stuff from Bryan Baker, the fastball still, hovering around 94, 95. It's getting hit hard, as it usually does, but he's getting a good amount of swings and misses on that pitch. He throws it over 50% of the time. He's got a slider that it used to be a cutter. He extended it into a slider last year. It's not my favorite pitch. It's kind of his go-to breaking ball. I don't love it. The changeup is my favorite pitch that Baker throws. He's throwing it about 17% of the time in the minor leagues this year. The issue with Baker's changeup is it has elite stuff. It has incredible movement, like down drop. It gets a lot of swings and misses. Guys can never square it up. It's super low hard hit rates against it. His issue is he struggles to find the feel and command for that changeup often. When he has command, Baker can be a high leverage reliever. When he doesn't, he's like a middle reliever at best with a fastball slider combination. Because that changeup last year, he would throw it in the dirt. He'd throw it to the backstop sometimes. You could tell when he didn't have the feel. But when he does have the feel, that pitch is almost unhittable. So that is the question for Bryan Baker here. If he does get a run in the Orioles bullpen, can he command his changeup? He did it in 2022. He didn't do it in 2023. Those were the differences between a really good season and a season that ended in AAA. That will be the big question here. He also added a curveball this year. Now he's only thrown it 19 times, so not using it a lot, but maybe another wrinkle that he could use. Baker's not going to get, these big high leverage shots, right? Unless the Orioles bullpen is just decimated and they need to throw him out there in extra innings. They're going to ease him in, right? Low leverage situations, blowout games at first, try to see how he's looking, back at the major league level for the first time, at least in the regular season in a while. But if he pitches well, he could stick around for a little bit as kind of that, 7th or 8th and final man in the bullpen. It's good because when his stuff is working, he gets both righties and lefties out, which is nice for the pen. But he could also be just a short-term fix, right? He was already on the 40-man roster. He does have options remaining, and he has 2 days of rest. He has not pitched since Saturday, and now didn't pitch Tuesday. He's got 3 days of rest. So he was definitely one of the freshest arms that was in Norfolk as well, which made it easier to just call him up off the 40-man roster. It's not going to be Baker for a long, long time unless he really flashes. He might have just been the guy who was most readily available to get up here. Maybe he'll pitch a couple of times, and by this weekend, there'll be a different arm in that spot. Totally believable. Honestly, I would think the longest he sticks around is maybe for another week and a half until Dean Kramer comes back. Maybe Kramer comes back, you put Suarez back in the bullpen, and Baker goes to AAA. There's a couple of things you can do. I don't think he's here for the long haul. I was a Bryan Baker believer for a long time. I officially, on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, gave up on Bryan Baker. Here is his chance to win me back. I will be watching closely and hoping that he has command of that changeup, because he is a different pitcher when he does. But Coulombe on the IL, Baker back wasn't the only roster move the Orioles made on Tuesday. There's also the one we already talked about. Jorge Mateo is back, but that means Connor Norby is in AAA. We'll talk about the fallout of that to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. So with all the parts you need, the prices you want, it is easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So the Orioles got the win over Atlanta on Tuesday night. One of the big reasons was Jorge Mateo blasting a 3-run homer, which was the difference in this one after the Orioles activated him off the injured list on Tuesday. Mateo, who was on the 7-day concussion IL, ended up missing 8 days after that weird situation where Mullins hit him in the back of the head with his bat inadvertently. But nice to see Mateo back, ready to go in the lineup. Hey, he was coming into Tuesday, had an 876 OPS on the year against lefties. So, of course, you want to get him back against a left-hander. And sure enough, he delivers that OPS going up even higher against lefties. But even Mateo, just in general, entering Tuesday, when he came back from the IL, hitting 246, 294 on base, 444 slugging. It's a 114 OPS plus. He's been 14% better than league average at the plate this year with the great base running and the good defense in the infield. You're going to take that every time. But with him coming back, and we know he's going to help this Orioles team. I mean, he was the everyday second baseman there for a stretch before he got the concussion. There had to be someone going down. And there were some people that thought Cedric Mullins was going to be optioned to AAA. That was never going to happen. I don't get that one at all. That I know he's struggling, but no. Like, it's the easy move here. We talked about it on this podcast. Listeners of this podcast know what was going to happen. I said pretty much no matter what Connor Norby does, he's going to go back down when Jorge Mateo comes up. And that's exactly what happened. Norby, who came up last week, made his major league debut in Toronto, ended up hitting a homer. He plays in 4 games, 14 plate appearances, 3 for 14 with a homer, a couple of singles, 2 RBIs, 3 strikeouts, no walks, 4 of 11 hard hit balls. Norby optioned back down to AAA Norfolk to make room on the roster for Mateo. And the reason why they brought up Norby is because they didn't want to bring up Jackson Holliday in Mateo's spot, because they knew it would be a short-term absence. Mateo would be back, and Norby could be a short-term guy. But I think overall it was a good first showing in the big leagues from Connor Norby. I think it only helps him in multiple ways going forward. It helps him in terms of, hey, if the Orioles need another short-term or long-term infielder, they know Connor Norby can handle himself up here and they can call him up. And also it helps him in potential trade value, because although it's only 14 plate appearances, it's a super small sample size. At the very least, other teams can see, okay, he came up to the bigs, and I know it was 4 games, but he held his own and he looked like he belonged. And that is big too. And I still see Connor Norby as more of a trade piece than a future piece for this Orioles team. I just think I've said it all along. There is no Orioles prospect in the high minors right now that is more blocked than Connor Norby, because Mateo is playing well, and mostly because Westberg and Henderson have been so good that second base is now penciled in for Jackson Holliday at some point. I mean, I know he struggled, but he's still, number 1 or number 2 prospect in all of baseball. He's going to get his shot. And it just feels like Connor Norby, especially with the defensive struggles he has at times, just there's not going to be room for him to get consistent at-bats. But even if the O's hold on to him and don't trade him at this year's deadline, I have a feeling they will. But if they don't, he's still going to be great depth to have in AAA. And the Orioles showed that off this week by being able to call him up and have him produce at the bottom of the order until Mateo got back. Now, it was Ramon Arias who got the start on Tuesday as well, as the Orioles sat the lefties and loaded the lineup with righties. And he is 1 for his last 11, or at least he was coming into this game. He picked up a knock in this one, but still 2 for his last 14. But before that was swinging the bat really well. Had a 900 OPS in May. Didn't start really playing till later in the month. Had a 7-game hit streak that was snapped on Sunday when he went 0 for 3. And, the talk was, could Ramon Arias be eventually pushed off the roster? He was struggling. He wasn't playing a whole lot at all, but Arias is also showing you why the Orioles want to keep him around, because Westberg was out for a couple of days. Mateo's out. You want to play him over Norby a little bit. Holiday struggling, and Arias steps in and swinging the bat really well. He's going to give you a great defense at third base or second. That's why you want to keep him around. And you can roster a guy like Arias along with Jackson Holiday. Maybe someone like Kyle Stowers would lose their spot there. But rostering Arias, Mateo, Norby, and Holiday all at the same time is completely impossible. And it can be hard to even roster 3 of those 4 guys at the same time. And for Jorge Mateo, listen, if he stayed all of last year with the struggles he had, he's certainly staying on this roster all of this year. Holiday will be back at some point. The question is really about Arias. And if he swings it more like this, it's more of a delayed return for Jackson Holiday. And it's also less of a chance that Norby gets an extended shot. It could be another, smaller shot. I'd be perfectly happy if another guy gets injured, bringing Norby back to fill that role. But it's just, as Arias plays well, Mateo plays well, and Holidays, figuring it out again, getting back on track in AAA Norfolk, it's just harder and harder to see any kind of extended run for Connor Norby. It's unfortunate. He's had almost 1,000 plate appearances in AAA Norfolk. I'm happy he got his shot. I'm sure he's happy he got his shot, but I do think still that when he gets that full shot at the big leagues finally, it will be with another organization, and hopefully it's a trade that helps the Orioles maybe get a reliever this year and helps them win a World Series. I think that would be a great outcome. I really do think for both sides, like it's ended up being for Joey Ortiz in Milwaukee after that Corbin Burns trade so far. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube, and rate and review the show wherever you listen as well. I am back tomorrow. We are recapping Game 2 between the Orioles and the Braves. It is a Nebraska baseball fan's dream. If you don't watch college baseball, you're not going to know what I'm talking about, but Spencer Schwellenbach and Cade Povich, 2 of the best players for Nebraska in the last 10, 20 years, are starting opposite each other in a Major League Baseball game. I know that Go Big Red Nation is loving that one. Listen, I'm a Big Ten baseball guy, so I am excited about this one, and I will be back tomorrow to recap Cade Povich's second career start and talk about how Game 2 of this series went, and of course, get you any further updates if we get them on Danny Coulombe. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.